Hey guys, I wanted to come on here and talk about the shooting at a white Jewish synagogue. And it seems like over the weekend, white supremacist terrorists have been very busy, and they will continue to be busy. I think that, one thing that a lot of Black people are failing to understand when they conceptualize this 400-year so-called curse of being enslaved to a system of white supremacy. What they don't understand is that if that is the case, then inherently, white society knows, that their reign is coming to an end, and then they will respond to that. I think a lot of Black people, they have this fantasy where they think that this is a biblical prophecy coming to play. And, that may or may not be the case, but we're not thinking about the ramifications of that if that was the case. And how that may affect the psyche of the white supremacists whose 400-year reign, which it actually seems like it was more of like a 6,000-year reign or whatever, or a or at least like a 2,000-year reign, is coming to the end. I don't think that Black people understand what that means in terms of how they're going to start acting, and what that means in terms of the position of Black people in this society and the harm that they're about to face as a result of this so-called 400-year reign that's supposed to be ending next year. So I think that's interesting that we're not considering that. But these white supremacists have been very busy. And as always, there's no tactical planning or decision for recourse on behalf of the Black community. There's only a bunch of excuses to remain the same and live in the misguided notion that somehow all they have to do is let go and let God. And they're letting go and letting a God take control that they don't even know to be existing for a fact. So I think that's really interesting. But the more we get clearly, as time goes by, white supremacists are escalating their violent, savage behavior. And that is because really there is no consequence. Because I guarantee you, when we go over these news clips about this issue, where you have a old white supremacist man who decided to go and murder 6 people and murder 11 people and go injure another 6 people, I can assure you they're still not going to label these people terrorists. And that's why it's on Black people to focus and shift the narrative. Unfortunately, we're not taking the opportunities that we do have afforded to us. We're not utilizing the mainstream, the social media, which the mainstream media is becoming obsolete as a result of. Like, the thing of it is Black people are going to wait until the mainstream media controls social media before they try to do something, rather than taking the opportunity now to use social media as a means to change the narrative and point out the terrorism, point out the hypocrisy, point out who the real violent threats to this country is. But we're not doing that. And this would need to be mostly done by the men. And the reason I say it would need to be done mostly by the men, because if you look at the inverse of white supremacy not being labeled terrorism, you see Black men being made to be the face of sexual assault and violence and terrorism in this country, when we know that's not the case. Now, I want to go to a couple of news clips so that we can see how the mainstream media pitches these stories. And the thing of it is if we should have been on code, we should have been fighting back. We're not doing it. And until we really get a good grasp on things and understand the situation that we're in, we're not going to utilize the opportunities that we have. It's much easier to say, that the 400-year reign is over and that we run social media. It's easier to say those things than to utilize this media platform to actually change the narrative in your favor. But let me get to these news clips, and then I'll come back with some commentary.
And CNN now able to confirm at least 4 dead, according to sources that are telling us at least 4 dead now in this shooting taking place in this place of worship this morning, just roughly 20 to 30 minutes after the doors opened for people to be there to worship in Saturday service. And so, James, we heard from Fred Rabner earlier. He is a member of the synagogue. He's usually there. He wasn't today. And he expressed his concern for an elderly couple, neighbors of his, that he knows might likely be in service today. Service attracting people of all ages, as Sam just said there. So talk to me how law enforcement also is trying to, tread very gingerly and carefully here, knowing there are people who are injured. Unclear whether first responders to carry out medical care have been able to get inside at the same time. It's a threatening situation. So how do officers, approach this? They're looking for any more suspects at the same time, trying to tend to those who are most vulnerable.
And it's sequential, and it's difficult because you're trying to help people out that are in need of aid, medical aid and assistance, while you're trying to move to the threat. And I have to say this, it's difficult. And again, as a former FBI SWAT team leader, when you're arriving on a scene like this, it's chaotic. You're trying to make assessments in real time. Is this a domestic dispute? Is this a hate crime? Is this an active shooter versus is this somebody that's taking hostage and wants to negotiate? And that's where the law enforcement paradigm has changed. Back in the 70s, back in the 80s, a lot of times in situations like this, you would have to deal with a barricaded subject. They would take hostages, and then law enforcement would set up a perimeter, and you did a contain and negotiate. The person that took the hostages wanted something in exchange, and human capital was what they were going to negotiate with. That has changed. The paradigm now is that most of the time when these things happen, it's over in 5 or 7 minutes. And the person on the other end either wants to martyr themselves, or they want to die by cop, or they want to go in for some hateful reason, whatever that hateful ideology is, kill as many people as possible, and then meekly give up like a coward. Those are the things that law enforcement has to sort through in real time. And I'll tell you, hats off to the Pittsburgh police there, their response. We don't have the final numbers. I'm sure that the death toll will probably rise. It usually does in these situations, but incredible work. As I watched them opening up the trunks of their cars and putting on their gear, I felt it, that palpable sense of they are going to the sound of the guns. Hats off to those law enforcement officers.
They have just said.
On the day after the deadliest attack on the Jewish community in U.S. history, somber officials formally charged the man who murdered 11 people and injured 6 others at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. 46-year-old Robert Bowers faces 29 federal and dozens of state charges for homicide and aggravated assault, including murdering victims for exercising their religious beliefs, a hate crime. He could face the death penalty.
The fact that this attack took place during a worship service makes it even more heinous. A place of worship is a sacred place.
We will be here to help you through this horrific episode. We'll get through this darkest day of Pittsburgh's history by working together.
At the Tree of Life Synagogue, community members continue to stop at a growing memorial throughout the day. The 11 people who died in the mass shooting ranged in age from 54 to 97. Joyce Feinberg was 75. She retired after a long career as a researcher at the University of Pittsburgh. Richard Gottfried, 65, had just celebrated his 38th wedding anniversary. 97-year-old Rose Mallinger was a devoted member of the congregation. Jerry Rabinowitz, 66, was a family physician. Cecil Rosenthal, 59, and David Rosenthal, 54, were brothers who attended services every Saturday. Bernice Simon, 84, and Sylvan Simon, 86, were husband and wife. 71-year-old Daniel Stein was a former president of the New Light congregation. Melvin Wax, 88, was a retired accountant, and 69-year-old Irving Younger taught classes on current events at the local community center and had 2 grandchildren. NewsHour Weekend's Yvette Feliciano traveled to Pittsburgh last night and has been with some members of the community.
17-year-old Emily Pressman helped organize yesterday's vigil led by local high school students.
I don't think I've accepted the fact that this happened to us.
Emily and her mother, Stacy, were glued to the television this morning when the names of the 11 people killed at the Tree of Life Synagogue were released. Emily and her siblings went to Hebrew school there, and the family often goes to the temple for social gatherings like weddings and bar and bat mitzvahs.
I mean, I could have been there. I know so many people who are part of that congregation that could have been there. And the people who were there just, I mean, they're in my hearts. They're in everyone's hearts right now.
The Tree of Life Synagogue is one of several in this tight-knit community that is home to a third of Pittsburgh's Jewish population. It housed 3 congregations and was a center of activity. Like most people we talked to here, Emily and her mom were confident they'd know some of the victims, and they were right.
I know 2 of them. I know that they were always greeted me. They were very kind souls. They brought smiles to my faces. They were very close to one of my best friends.
It's just starting to sink in this morning. You know, I woke up this morning tired, with a pit in my stomach for a second, not really knowing why. And then I remembered what happened. These are the people who were in synagogue on a Saturday morning. These were the diehards who were there because they, wanted to celebrate their faith. They were wonderful older members of our community.
Emily Pressman said she and others in the community felt helpless watching the news yesterday and needed to take action.
People were murdered for their faith. It's not just saying something anymore. It's not just pointing a picture and saying, "Go die, Jew." It's them honestly shooting a gun in people's faces and killing them. I think people are upset. I think people are angry. And I think there's a fine line between angry and hate. And right now we just have to make sure that people don't cross that line.
My family were members of Orla Simcha before it merged with Tree of Life congregation. It's just a really warm, welcoming environment and place. And so I'm absolutely heartbroken.
Adam Hertzman is the director of marketing for the Jewish Federation of Greater Pittsburgh. He says the organization has seen a rise in anti-Semitic vandalism over the last few months.
There were pamphlets put on cars in the Squirrel Hill area with anti-Semitic rhetoric on them. And there's, I think, sadly in the society, always an undercurrent of racism and anti-Semitism.
Emily Pressman says if this could happen in Squirrel Hill, it could happen anywhere.
Now, you guys have seen both of those clips, and you've also seen how in not one of them that they describe this man as the terrorist that he is. Because the thing of it is religion is, when you express disdain for certain religions, that is a political, that's a political stance. And that's what they say determines whether you're a terrorist or not, is if you're murdering and engaging in these mass acts of destruction based on any political stance. And so the thing of it is this was a terrorist. It was a white supremacist terrorist. But of course, as you saw in each news clip, they focused more on the victims of the terrorism than the terrorist himself. And that's because they want to do that, because they don't want you to focus on the fact that, once again, this is a white person engaging in terrorist behavior, even if they don't define it terrorist behavior, engaging in white supremacist behavior that's contributing to mass destruction and mass fatalities. And they're going to continue to do this. But this is what I told you guys is one of the prices that white people pay for white supremacy. Because regardless to whether they call them Jews or not, regardless to their religious affiliation, that was a community full of white people. Every last victim on there were white. Now, granted, they probably don't care because they're like, okay, well, those were older white people. They had maybe like 2 to 3 good years left in them before they died of natural causes anyway. But the thing of it is this is what they do all the time. They'll go do this to some so-called Mexicans. They've done this in black churches. This is just what their history is. And sadly, even though this is their history, every single person on the face of this planet feel like they are more safe in white communities than anyone else. This is why I say that there has to be some level of demonic sorcery being used. And this is also why I say young or old, male or female, foreign or domestic, they're all the same. Because if you look at this article, it says Robert Bowers, 46. So again, they don't age out of it. Has been identified as the suspect in Saturday's horrific mass shooting at the Pittsburgh synagogue, according to a law enforcement official. Police have Bowers in custody after the rampage that has resulted in 11 fatalities and 6 injuries. Okay. Now, they say he was armed with an arsenal of weapons and a virulent hatred for the unsuspecting targets who had gathered to worship in the heart of the local Jewish community. Because understand, white supremacists are not smart. They're extremely dumb. So they'll misconstrue, they will use they'll use religion and culture and language and ethnicity as interchangeable to race. Okay, because again, these are the group of people who needed to create a test to try and prove their intelligence, but unfortunately, just like nature contradicts the mere notion of their genetic superiority, reality contradicts the notion of their intellectual superiority. They're not superior in any way, shape, and form, and that's why they can look at somebody's religious affiliation and see it as somehow indicative of their race or a racial difference. And this is why I say it wouldn't matter whether they're around each other, whether they're around Jews. This is just what their nature is. They will find some reason to be hateful because that is just who they are. Just like a lion would find something to hunt because it is a natural predator. And so things that are within your nature, it doesn't matter whether you're a human or an animal, a plant or whatever, you're going to try to find some way to resolve behaviors that are consistent with your nature, because that is your nature. You don't have a choice but to engage in those behaviors. The problem is that the rest of society refuses to see them for who they are and act accordingly. It says, court documents provide glimpses of suspect Robert Bowers in the 20 minutes of bloodshed Saturday at the Tree of Life Congregation Synagogue in the city's affluent Squirrel Hill neighborhood. Okay. Mayor Bill Peduto at a news conference Sunday promised that the city would emerge stronger from its darkest days. And look, and they just say stuff because no, it's not. What's really going to happen is that white supremacists are going to continue to terrorize their communities and cause bloodshed and carnage. They're going to continue to pretend that they care. They're going to continue to pretend that they have emotions toward this. And they're going to continue to do absolutely nothing to address it. Like their fake emotions is so exhausting because all of this is disingenuous. The bottom line of it is they say this every time there's a shooting. Every single time. They say, oh, well, hate won't win. We're going to emerge stronger. This is not going to affect our community. We can't let the devil win. And then 2 days later, another situation is going to happen in another city, and they're going to be saying the same thing. So it's just the thing of it's so disingenuous. And that's why I don't think anybody should feel any sympathy. Nobody should be saying condolences, because the reality of it is that if Black people were running around doing things like this, they would have been found a way to circumvent them. They would have been done it, even if it meant exterminating the entire American Black population. The reason why they're not doing anything, because these are white people, and at the end of the day, they care more about the image of white moral superiority and white nonviolence than anything. That's why they'll sit here and focus more on the villains than doing something about the fact that this is notorious for this is common white behavior. And look, here they come again with the stupidity. We are a resilient city. We have been knocked down before, but we have always been able to stand back up because we work together. So basically he's saying because all white people in this community didn't die and there's still white people in it living their lives, then we really don't need to address the fact that there's a white terrorist running rogue in our community because we'll survive. Again, it's completely disingenuous. So it says Bowers allegedly burst into the Tree of Life Congregation Synagogue in the affluent Squirrel Hill neighborhood, shouting anti-Semitic epithets as he opened fire on the congregants. His extensive armaments included a Colt AR-15 semi-automatic rifle and 3 Glock 357 handguns. At least 3 of the weapons were purchased legally, the Associated Press reported, citing an unnamed law enforcement official. Who cares if they were, why do we care? Does anybody care whether they were purchased legally or illegally? Like, really, what relevance does that pose? The outcome is still the same regardless to whether the means to obtain them is legal or illegal. I don't understand why they would even put that in there. that doesn't, who cares? What they want you to let you know that, oh, this man, he killed these 11 people, but I mean, he purchased the gun legally, so he was in his legal right to own a gun, but he still killed these 11 people. It's so disingenuous. The U.S. attorney in Pittsburgh is seeking approval for the death penalty against Bowers. The gunshots pierced Saturday morning quiet in the neighborhood of the city's east side. Marcy Pepper, a member of the synagogue until this year, told U.S. Today she heard gunshots from her home. E. Joseph Charney, a member of the synagogue since 1955, was in the synagogue waiting for the morning service when he heard a loud noise downstairs. Look, the thing of it is we don't even have to read this, because the bottom line is it's the same thing that's going to happen next week. I mean, you just had a white supremacist in Kroger targeting black people and murdering them. You had another white supremacist Trump supporter sending bombs to, you know, the Democratic parties and to the Trump administration, and that was just a couple of days ago. And so, look, tomorrow you're going to be looking at another story mimicking this, because this is just who they are, and nobody wants to acknowledge it. And the thing of it is that's why I say it's up to black people to focus on changing the narrative. Now, it says the criminal complaint says Bowers made statements evincing an animus towards people of the Jewish faith. Bowers told one law enforcement officer in a substance that they're committing genocide to my people. I just want to kill Jews, according to the complaint. Again, these are the idiots. Okay, these people are idiots, because how? Committing genocide to your people, how? They're white. They just subscribe to Judaism, which is another branch of Christianity. It's like, it makes no sense. Bowers repeated comments regarding genocide, his desire to kill Jewish people, and that Jewish people needed to die, the complaint adds. Again, I don't feel sorry for their community. This is just more white-on-white crime, and we know that that's an epidemic. They're not going to address it the way they need to. So as far as I'm concerned, I really don't care. You guys let me know what you think. What I'm most concerned about is the fact that black people refuse to take social media and use it to frame the narrative that they feel like should be framed. But you guys let me know what you think. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you in the next video.